Hello again, this is Professor Jessica Brown, and this is our second tutorial, which is going to be working with shapes in InDesign. And as we go through these different lessons, we'll always revisit some previous information. So again, we're creating a new document, file, new document. We have our preview on. We have our letter defaulted. I'm actually going to turn the preview off for this one. And we can actually type in a number of columns. You don't just have to use the up and down keys. You can always go right into the areas and type whatever you want in there. And then we'll do our one pica and hit OK. So this time we're going to be working with shapes. So there are two shape items here on your toolbar. One is called the rectangle frame and the other one is the rectangle tool. They really are the same tool. I tend to use the frame when I'm working with photographs and the tool when I'm working with shapes, so I'll just stick with that. So I'm just going to select this here, and you see you get the crosshatch, and then I'm just going to draw a square. And I'm drawing it across two columns, so 1, 2. So my students, you guys will hear me say a lot, I'll zoom in here, about staying on the grid, using the columns to your benefit, which is why you have them there. So I'm going to delete this. You can just hit delete on your keyboard to delete anything on your pages. So when you're drawing items, you don't just want to draw them in the middle of nowhere. You have the columns here, the guides here to help you. So use them. So I have 3 items here I want to delete. I can click each one individually and hit delete. Or I'm going to undo. So edit, undo, edit, undo. After this, I'll be using the quick key, so Command Z to undo. I can just click and drag and grab everything I want to grab and then hit delete, which of course is much faster. I'm going to undo that, Command Z. I could also do select all, which is Command A on your keyboard, and then that will grab everything as well and hit delete. Of course, you should not do select all if there's only a couple of items you want to delete, so just be careful when you're using certain keys. So I'm going to delete those. All right, so I'm going to draw from the top of my guide 2 columns, and then there's my shape. So InDesign defaults to having a shape that has a black stroke and an empty fill. And how do I know that? Well, over here in our control panel, there is an area. The top one tells you the fill, and then the bottom one tells you the stroke color. So these are where your colors are. So I know that my fill is empty, is none, because that's what's highlighted here. And then the stroke is black. So if I want to change the colors of either of those items, if I want my fill to be this cyan, this magenta, I just click whatever color I want my fill to be. And the same for the stroke. So whatever color you want the stroke to be, you select it. So now I have object with a fill of the magenta and a stroke of the green. I can also see that here at the bottom of my toolbar. And if I open up my swatches panel over here, I can see it there as well. This is a panel that you might consider having open all the time. It has all the colors that are a default on your InDesign program. So let's say you didn't want a square. Let's say you wanted a different shape. There's a couple of ways you can go about that. The first is to just draw the shape you wanted in the first place. So if I go to the rectangle tool again, I'll hold it down, there's some more options here. So in these programs, when you see the little triangles at the bottom of the different tools, that means there are more options there. You just need to hold that tool down. So I'm going to hit ellipse and get my hatches again, and then I'm just going to draw. So these are my ovals. And again, they default to black with an empty fill. Now, so this is where the select all doesn't work because I don't want to get rid of my square. So again, just be careful of when you use that particular one. Now, if I want a perfect circle, I want to hold down the shift key. So when you hold down the shift key in these Adobe programs, it keeps things in proportion and scale, which is very important, especially when you're working with photographs. And you can tell the size of different items on your document by going into the control panel under your width and height. So for things that should be in perfect proportion, like this circle, the width and height would be the same number. If you wanted to change the size of the shape, I can either do it by going to one of the handles. So these little square boxes on the corners and the centers of your shape, those are handles. So I can just change the size that way. I can actually type in the dimensions if I have a specific dimension in mind for some reason. I can type it in manually, and that will work. And if I want to make this smaller or larger but keep it in proportion, I just hold the shift key down and scale it as necessary, but it will keep it equal. So again, the width and height are equal here, and it fits nicely into one column. Oops, almost. Now it fits into one column. The second thing you can do is, let's say you spend a lot of time with this shape. You have the colors you want. You can see, if you have a hard time seeing the colors, you can turn your guides off. There's a few ways to do it. If I go down here at the bottom of my toolbar and I hold it down and I select preview, you can see those columns, those guides go away, because they're phantom. They won't print. They're not really there. They're just to help you design. I can also do that up here in the control panel preview. So those go away. I can also hit the W on the keyboard to help me see. So when you're designing, you always want to have your guides visible. You just want to make sure you take them off to see better your final project or as you go along. All right, so let's say I'm going to turn these off. I'm going to go back to a black stroke. Let's say I want the stroke to look different. Maybe I want it to be dotted, or I want it to be a circle. Right next to your colors, this bottom area here, you can change the type of line, the type of stroke. So if you wanted a dotted one, you can see now that this is dotted. And I did the command spacebar to get my magnifier, and I can do option command spacebar to get it to be small, to minus it out. And if I click and drag when I'm holding those keys down, I can focus on a particular area. And then command 0 lets me zoom out to see the full page again. All right, so we have our dotted lines here. We can maybe have some hash marks. Always make sure you have the item selected. So hash marks. You can increase the thickness of the stroke by hitting the number that's up here. Again, you can type numbers in manually in addition to using the up and down arrows. And so I'm going to zoom out a little. So let's say you did all this work with this shape and you don't want to have to start over by making a new shape. So if I go under Object to Convert Shape, and here I can put ellipse. So now I have a different shape, and then I just have to adjust it if I need it to be a perfect circle. If you know exactly the size you want it to be, you can put those numbers in up here in the control panel and do more adjusting as you need, as you see fit to make it work. So there are other shapes here you can use. If you use a polygon, that will give you, of course, a polygon. If you want a triangle, Object, Convert Shape, you can make it a triangle, and there's your triangle. I'll give that a fill of yellow. And then if you want to turn or rotate items, you can, again, go to your handles, and if you can see, the little arrow on the corner will give you a little curve, and you can turn your items that way. If you know the exact angle you want something to face, you can put the actual angle up here again in your control panel. So if you know you want it to be 45 degrees, you can just type that in and it will give you the angle you want. So there's always multiple ways to do things in any of these programs, and that's how you can make the angle. Finally, if you want to work with just straight lines, you hit your line tool here. And remember, again, holding down the shift key will ensure that you draw which that was not the shift key, but you see what happens if I don't have the shift key held down. This clearly is not a straight line. So holding down the shift key will ensure that your line stays straight. And again, you can change the size and type of line in the same areas as we did here with the strokes. And of course, you can do that with vertical or horizontal line. If you want to have different sort of arrows or heads on your strokes, you can go into the stroke panel over here and you can determine how you want your ends to look. So you can have a starting end and an end, and you can change the color just like you would anything else on your strokes. And of course you can rotate them as well. Oops. You have to get it right up on the arrow, or for this I'm just going to use the control panel because that was easier. And those are just quick ways to work with lines and shapes in InDesign.